The second meeting of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol, and the second meeting of the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement. Distinguished delegates, I give the floor to the Chair of SUBSTA. Adonia, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished delegates, I declare open the second meeting of the subsidiary body for scientific and technological advice. Distinguished delegates, I give the floor to the chair of SBI. Julia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Adonia. Distinguished delegates, I declare open the second meeting of the subsidiary body for implementation. I now give the floor back to the President.
Dear colleagues, we will begin the plenary with statements from groups of parties. After hearing the statements from groups, the floor will be open for statements from individual parties, followed by statements from the observers. I encourage groups of parties, individual parties, and observers to keep their statements succinct and within the respective time limit. Please note, you are welcome to upload the full text of any statement on the submission portal. A button has been provided on the session web pages to link directly to the plenary statements, allowing easier uploading and access. You will hear a bell when you have used up the time allotted for your statement. Additionally, in line with the practice of other UN bodies and to ensure the smooth conduct of the meeting, microphones will be automatically turned off when the allotted time is exceeded. I appeal to parties to stay in the room while the observers deliver their statements. I will now invite statements from the four groups with non-overlapping memberships. I encourage you to keep your statements to a maximum of 5 minutes. I now invite the delegation of Iraq to deliver a statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. Iraq, you have the floor.
Ambassador Andrew DeLego, distinguished presidencies and chairs of the subsidiary bodies, Iraq deems it an honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. The Group of 77 and China would like to thank the government of Brazil for their hospitality, extended and their work in preparation for COP30, with a view toward a successful outcome. Group of 77 in China thanks also the COP29 presidency of Azerbaijan for the successful COP29 in Baku, as well as their continued leadership in the lead-up to COP30. Kindly note that in the interest of time, I will share this statement, which is a summarized version of our statement, and the complete version will be shared thereafter. 2025 marked 10 years since the adoption of the Paris Agreement, which is built on the principles and provisions of the Convention. It's important to question how much of these negotiations have transpired into real tangible action. In this context, the G77 and China places significant importance on the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. We underscore that meaningful climate action must be tailored to the diverse national circumstances of developing countries and advocate for meaningful climate action driven by the scaled-up means of implementation. Scaling up climate finance in accordance with the principles and provisions of UNFCCC and Paris Agreement form the core of the priorities for G7 and China. In this context, Group of 7 and China welcomes decisions on new collective quantitative goals at COP29 and calls for its full and timely delivery by developed countries. The group emphasizes that $300 billion remain significantly insufficient to meet the needs of developing countries in their just effort to combat climate change. Therefore, developed countries must significantly scale up the provisions of climate finance and means of implementation to enable ambitious and urgent climate action at the scale and speed required. Furthermore, we emphasize the importance of operationalizing the CMA's decision to urge the operating entities of the financial mechanism and other funds to at least triple their annual outflow of the operating entities by 2030, with a significant increase of public resources provided through the funds. Group of 7 China expresses grave concern regarding the application of unilateral and contradictory policies on the project proposal by UNEDO on behalf of the Sultan of Oman in the Green Climate Fund. On the GGA, the Group of 7 China highlights the importance of reaching successful outcomes, which includes means of implementation. Furthermore, it is equally important to operationalize the Baku Adaptation Road and further advance and alleviate adaptation and implementation of GAGA under the UAE framework for global climate resilience beyond 2030. The group stresses that the GSD's process has a clearly defined core purpose under the Paris Agreement Article 14 and emphasized that the discussion on GSD's refinement should focus on what will help improve the effectiveness of the GSDs in achieving its core purpose. On the agenda item of WIM review at COP30, the outcome should strengthen the coordination, coherence and complementarity between the WIM with its executive committee and its San Diego network and the Fund for Response and Loss and Damage. On the just transition, G7 in China calls for a strong outcome on just transition and fully reflect on the development realities and aspiration of developing countries. Group of 7 in China highlights that the transition to the enhanced transparency framework should serve to enhance implementation of the Convention, not undermine nor create any backsliding from the existing reporting and review rules and so on. On response measures, we welcome the productive dialogue held this year and recognize its vital role in ensuring work effort take into account the impact of different responses measures. In closing, we will continue to stress that measures to address climate change, including
Thank you very much, G77 and China. I now invite the European Union to deliver the statement. Denmark, you have the floor.
We are delivering this statement on behalf of the European Union and its 27 member states. We gather in the beautiful city of Belem at a moment when the science could not be clearer and the stakes could not be higher. Hurricane Melissa in the Caribbean and the recent super typhoons in the Philippines remind us of what climate change already means for lives and livelihoods. Our thoughts are with the communities who suffered devastating losses. Their resilience must strengthen our collective resolve. The EU comes to COP30 with that determination. The EU and its member states submitted its 2035 NDC to reduce net greenhouse gas emissions by 66.25 to 72.5% below 1990 levels by 2035. This is an ambitious milestone on the path to a 90% net reduction by 2040 compared to 1990 levels, leading the way towards climate neutrality by 2050 and aligned with the Paris goals. The Paris Agreement has shown that multilateralism delivers results, but we must all do our best to go further and faster. Ambition and international cooperation must be reflected in the COP30 outcomes. Firstly, through a negotiated response plan for enhancing the collective ambition and implementation of our NDCs. The NDC synthesis report revealed many quality improvements in the design of the new NDCs, and evidence is also present in the BTRs. However, efforts remain insufficient to keep 1.5 within reach. All parties, and especially major economies, must show leadership through stronger policies and faster delivery. We must accelerate action through innovation, growth, and competitiveness, as well as the full implementation of the outcomes and guidance from the first global stocktake. Annual consideration of the NDC and BTR synthesis report is needed to maintain momentum. In parallel, we must encourage the scaling up of partnerships and plurilateral initiatives under the action agenda as expressed of cooperation and commitment to act faster and more resolute. Secondly, by building resilience and preparedness everywhere, we need to accelerate adaptation action and finalize the work on indicators to track progress towards the global goal on adaptation. Linking climate action and sustainable development is critical for countries to prepare for and respond to climate impacts and inform about collective progress. Thirdly, by reaffirming our collective commitment to deliver on the new collective quantified goals set in Baku. All actors are called to work together to enable the scaling up of finance for climate action to developing countries from all sources to at least reach 1.3 trillion per year by 2035. We need to mobilize climate finance to at least $300 billion a year by 2035, and we need to urgently improve access, in particular for LDCs and SIDS and for adaptation. In 2024, the EU and its member states provided 31.8 billion euro of public finance and mobilized 11 billion euro of private finance to support climate action in developing countries. The EU and its member states, together with the European Investment Bank, are the largest providers of international public climate finance. We thank the COP29 and COP30 presidencies for the Baku to Belem roadmap, for highlighting solutions and presenting a coherent framework that can guide our collective action, accelerate implementation, and ensure that broader climate finance becomes a key instrument for the achievement of the Paris goals. Likewise, we must reach agreement on the modalities of the UAE dialogue, where parties can reflect on the implementation of the GST, identify barriers, enablers for action, and strengthen cooperation across all pillars of the Paris Agreement. We must secure an outcome that advances the Just Transition Work Programme, placing vulnerable workers, communities, and households at its heart, ensuring it becomes a space for shared experience and mutual learning on how to implement just transition domestically. After 3 years of dialogue on the 2.1c, COP30 also has the opportunity to advance towards making finance flows consistent with the Paris Agreement, including by agreeing to a standing mandate to track progress. Finally, we must reach agreement on the new Gender Action Plan. Advancing gender equality is not only a question of justice, it's a key enabler of effective climate action and a driver of resilience in communities around the world. Each of these outcomes matters in its own right, but together they define the credibility of our work here in Belem. The EU stands ready to engage constructively with all partners to ensure an ambitious delivery across the board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EU. I would like to invite the Environmental Integrity Group to deliver the statement. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Environmental Integrity Group. Chair, Excellencies, dear colleagues, we meet at a defining moment. Science is clear. The window to keep 1.5 alive is closing. Current NDCs fall short, demonstrating an ambition gap that needs to be closed. These are serious setbacks, but it is not the story of despair. The energy transition is underway. Renewables now dominate new power generation, showing that markets and innovation are transitioning away from fossil fuels. We celebrate those who have submitted ambitious NDCs. 10 years after Paris, that agreement helped to bend global temperature trajectories, reduce renewable costs, and unlock trillions in clean investments. Policies are stronger and more effective. The Paris Agreement works, and we must make it work fully. Yet the latest synthesis report confirms that current NDCs deliver only a 17% reduction below 2019 levels when science calls for 60% by 2035. The ambition and implementation gap demands a structured political and technical response under the Paris process to accelerate action before 2030. And yet, there is still no dedicated space to collectively assess the progress towards NDC's implementation and ambition and to agree on follow-up actions. This year marks 25 years of the Environment Integrity Group. 25 years of bridge building and commitment to science and environmental integrity. Our group is deeply concerned by growing pushback against science from some quarters. Science is not negotiable. It must remain the foundation of our work. The next global stocktake must stay anchored in evidence, even when that evidence is uncomfortable. Here in the Amazon, COP30 must deliver for forests. The world is off track to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. We must protect, conserve, and sustainably manage these vital ecosystems, learning from one another to achieve our climate, biodiversity, and development goals. We are alarmed by the global loss of forest sinks and the rising pressure on nature everywhere. COP30 must also mark a new era for adaptation. Agreed indicators and the robust national adaptation plans are key to measuring and driving progress. The more countries that report using these indicators, the clearer our global picture will be and the stronger our collective response. This is about building resilience and opportunities for all. We also welcome the progress on loss and damage. It is essential to strengthen coherence across the loss and damage architecture, ensuring that the Santiago Network, the new fund, and the WIM work in a coordinated and complementary way. Recommitting to the Paris Agreement also means unlocking the climate finance required for ambitious NDCs, 1.5 pathways, and global resilience. Those most affected by climate change must have access to the support they need. The EIG stands by the new collective quantified goal on climate finance, and all members of our group will support its realization in their respective roles as recipients, providers, or both. Finally, we must align all financial flows with low-emission, climate-resilient development pathways. The outcome of the Sharm el-Sheikh dialogue should reflect real-world needs, engage all actors, and build on existing experiences to drive investments toward a climate-safe future. We believe the co-chairs report and its recommendations are a good starting point. Colleagues, the world looks for us for direction. 10 years after Paris and 25 years after the founding of the EIG, let us show that unity is stronger than division and that science still guides us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Switzerland. I would like to invite now the umbrella group to deliver a statement. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished colleagues. I'm speaking on behalf of Umbrella Group members present at COP30. 10 years from the Paris Agreement, we have made significant progress. We've moved the world from a catastrophic 4 degrees of warming to 2.3 to 2.5 degrees based on currently assessed 2035 NDCs. Almost all countries have committed to net zero and most have lodged successive emissions reduction targets. Global investment in clean energy is growing exponentially and was at $2 trillion per year in 2024. We have more to do, but we should recognise the Paris Agreement is working. It has and will continue to drive some of the biggest changes in our economic and energy systems since the Industrial Revolution. And in the process, it is creating economic opportunity and supporting global prosperity. At the same time, it's clear our efforts must accelerate to keep 1.5 degrees within reach. COP30 must demonstrate our unwavering commitment to the Paris Agreement and our commitment to do more together. We must deliver a strong outcome on 1.5 and NDCs at COP30 that reflects the progress made, demonstrates our collective commitment to closing the gap to 1.5, and highlights opportunities to accelerate climate ambition and implementation. The implementation of the global stocktake across all pillars of Paris must include the full operationalisation of the UAE dialogue. Our work must continue to be informed by the best available science, and parties must support the IPCC to deliver outputs of the 7th assessment cycle in time to inform the second global stocktake. We welcome the first BTRs, a significant step towards implementation and a significant step towards building trust in our collective efforts. The mitigation work programme can profile practical opportunities and address barriers to reduce emissions in the forest and waste sectors, and prepare us for a successful review of the work programme next year. We will work with parties to adopt indicators to track progress towards the global goal on adaptation, and we thank the experts for their work. We celebrate the first call for funding requests from the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, and look forward to completing the review of the Warsaw International Mechanism. We recognise the significant outcome on the NCQG last year, including its importance for adaptation finance. We reaffirm the role of developed countries to take the lead in delivery of at least $300 billion per year by 2035. We are committed to working together in the context of a global effort to scale up financing to developing countries to at least $1.3 trillion by 2035. We must further complement the delivery of the NCQG with accelerated efforts to make finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low emissions and climate resilient development. There is an opportunity at Belem to take forward this work to accelerate investment toward the Paris goals. Outcomes on the Just Transition Work Programme should drive forward inclusive action and implementation to accelerate 1.5 aligned pathways to net zero and resilient societies, including on the energy transition. We very much welcome the positive engagement in agriculture, including in the action agenda. We must finalise a new gender action plan that is ambitious, implementable, and drives mainstreaming of gender-responsive climate action. We welcome efforts to promote the rights of Indigenous peoples and the rights of children and youth in climate action. And finally, Chair, we all countries in the Umbrella Group at this session affirm their united support for Australia's proposal to host COP31 in 2026 in partnership with the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Australia. I will now open the floor for statements from other groups for a maximum of 5 minutes, and I invite Venezuela to speak on behalf of ALBA. Venezuela, please.
Gracias, presidente. Tengo el honor de hacer esta intervención en nombre de Cuba, Venezuela, países miembros del ALBA. Nos sumamos a lo expresado por el G77 y China y el Grupo de Países en Desarrollo de Pensamiento Afín. América Latina y el Caribe es uno de los territorios más vulnerables del planeta como consecuencia de los efectos del cambio climático, y los países del ALBA sufren los impactos crónicos y graduales del cambio climático, lo cual está repercutiendo y paralizando los avances en el desarrollo sostenible en armonía con la naturaleza y la lucha contra la pobreza. Todo ello en un contexto global de crisis financiera, energética, climática, alimentaria, institucional, de paz y de seguridad internacionales. Esto representa un reto importante que debemos enfrentar, pero no podemos hacerlo solos. La respuesta al cambio climático debe ser integral, justa y multidimensional para que pueda ser sostenible y transformadora, pensada y ejecutada en el beneficio de nuestros pueblos. El derecho al desarrollo de nuestros pueblos será siempre una prioridad. A 10 años de la adopción del Acuerdo de París, es menester que todos trabajemos juntos, reflexionando y concretando acciones en conjunto, en mutirao, para luchar contra esa visión generada por el modelo capitalista depredador. Es urgente transformar el pensamiento y el accionar global, para lo cual es necesario escuchar y trabajar juntos en favor de nuestros pueblos, quienes sufren de cerca los embates del cambio climático y la falta de voluntad política de los países desarrollados de tomar acciones concretas en contra del desarrollo. Es más requerido que nunca. Debemos dejar de lado los dobles discursos y que esta COP sea la COP de la verdad. Es momento de realmente implementar la Convención y el Acuerdo de París con voluntad política, no intentar renegociarlo por la vía de facto. Hemos visto que los países desarrollados siguen eludiendo su responsabilidad de aportar sus promesas en materia de financiamiento climático y que se ha demostrado que es totalmente insuficiente para asumir las necesidades de los países en desarrollo en mitigación, adaptación y daños y pérdidas. Es preocupante la conducta de los países desarrollados que no desean ni siquiera conversar sobre este asunto, eludiendo la incorporación del tema en agenda y evadiendo cualquier involucramiento real en temas relacionados. Y eso es grave, ya que afecta el futuro de toda la humanidad. Es momento de trabajar en favor del multilateralismo real, verdadero, que involucre a todos los sectores de la sociedad. Todos pueden aportar en esta heroica tarea de promover la defensa de los derechos de la Madre Tierra, la justicia climática y, sobre todo, defender y promover el derecho al desarrollo de los pueblos en el contexto de la crisis climática capitalista y avanzar en los procesos de transición justa que tanto requerimos para erradicar la pobreza. Hablemos de realidades, del día a día del ciudadano y del impacto que tienen las consecuencias de la imposición de medidas coercitivas unilaterales que representan un crimen de lesa humanidad que abarca un amplio espectro, incluyendo los aspectos comerciales, constituyéndose en acciones que afectan de forma directa e indirecta las capacidades para responder a la crisis climática y en las capacidades de respuesta de los Estados para garantizar el derecho al desarrollo y los derechos básicos. Y sobre esto hay países que no desean hablar en este encuentro. ¿A qué le temen? ¿A la verdad? La COP en Brasil representará la oportunidad única para tener compromisos más ambiciosos, realistas y sobre todo sinceros en materia de adaptación, pérdidas, daños, mitigación y provisión de medios e implementación, incluida la financiación climática, la transferencia de tecnologías y la creación de capacidades. Para el ALBA es fundamental un multilateralismo inclusivo, participativo, basado en la cooperación que convoque a todos a debatir el futuro común sobre la base de la equidad. Finalmente, hacemos un llamado a los países para unir esfuerzos y tener la voluntad política para lograr avances importantes. Desde Venezuela, ante las amenazas bélicas irracionales en el Caribe, abogamos por la paz y el derecho a la soberanía de los pueblos.
Muchas gracias, Venezuela. I now invite Palau to speak on behalf of AOSIS. Palau, you have the floor. Palau? No. So I will then invite India to speak on behalf of LMDC and BASIC. India, you will have the floor to speak first for LMDC, then I will call on you again to speak for BASIC. If not, you're going to have only one slot. So please, India for LMDC. India.
Mr. President, we congratulate you on your appointment and thank you for the successful opening of the COP30. We associate ourselves with a statement made by Iraq for G77 in China. COP30 marks important milestones. It is 10 years of the Paris Agreement and 33 years of the Convention. The fact that all of us are gathered here is a testament to our commitment to multilateralism and international cooperation. Presidency and presiding officers, while celebrating milestones, it is important to reaffirm what we stand for and who we stand for in the process. We, the LMDC, speak here for over half the world's population. As we celebrate multilateralism, we must be cognizant of the factor that can seriously undermine multilateralism. This is the most opportune moment to meaningfully discuss climate change, related trade restrictive unilateral measures, and how they impact our countries. In this era of implementation, the means are among some of the biggest deterrents for developing countries. And that is why we have presented our proposal for an agenda item on Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement, which speaks to the legal obligations of the developing countries to provide finance to developing countries for mitigation and adaptation. However, in the spirit of extreme compromise and as a reaffirmation of our support and commitment to the process, we accepted discussing issues very dear to our heart, both unilateral trade measures and implementation of the Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement in informal presidency consultation, and we trust these will bear fruitful outcomes under your leadership, Mr. President. This occasion also makes it an imperative to not use the 10-year milestone to change the very architecture of the Paris Agreement. We must remain committed to and guided by equity and common but differentiated responsibilities, the cornerstone principles of the Convention and its Paris Agreement. All of us signed us to the CBDR in Brazil back in 1992. We must reaffirm our strongest commitment to the principles here, not attempt to sideline and ignore it. Over the next 2 weeks, we must stay true to the cause and advance adaptation, which is among the most important issues for us. Adaptation finance needs are ever increasing, and a huge adaptation finance gap stares us in the face. Reports state that needs exceed nearly 15 times the existing finance flows. We are also not on track to double international public adaptation finance, a meager sum to begin with, by 2025. On the GGA, the means of implementation indicators must reflect the progress of finance, technology, transfer, and capacity building provided by developed countries to developing countries in line with Article 9, 10, and 11 of the Paris Agreement. The Presidency must make a special call to the parties to submit their national adaptation plan in line with national priorities and progress, including providing adequate support for preparation and implementation of the NAPs. On just transition, we must establish here institutional arrangements that systematically integrate the principles of the UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement in the implementation of the JTWP. We also look forward to the launch of the Technology Implementation Program as a key catalyst to drive ambitious means of implementation to developing countries to implement their NDCs and to strengthen support for the implementation of technology priorities identified by the developing countries, as well as to address key barriers to technology transfers from the developed countries. Mr. President, means of implementation are necessary to unlock ambition in developing countries. Since this is a COP of truth, let us affirm the truth. We are not here to point fingers, but the facts speak for themselves. We cannot simply bypass the roadblocks and the impediments to implementation. Let us address them meaningfully and collectively. We assure you of our complete support and take this opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to work constructively and collectively for the greater good of the Mother Earth and our people. We thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, India. So, India for basic.
Thank you, Chair. As India takes the floor on behalf of the basic group of countries, I take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to the COP30 President, André Correa de Lago, and express deep appreciation to the Presidency, Government of Brazil, and also to the people of Port City of Belem for their extremely gracious hospitality and excellent arrangements. At the outset, we express our full and unwavering support for multilateralism and international cooperation on climate change, particularly in the current geopolitical context. We reiterate the significance of the full, effective and sustained implementation of the Convention and its Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement in accordance with the principles of equity and CBDRRC. This COP is being organized 10 years after the Paris Agreement was signed and has now evolved to incorporate all its multifaceted dimensions to achieve its key objectives. Successive COPs have focused on key themes of the agreement. If COP28 was the GST COP and COP29 was the COP for finance, COP30 should be the COP of adaptation. Adaptation is the most pressing necessity for billions of the most vulnerable worldwide, the majority of whom have contributed the least to global warming but will suffer the most from its impacts. Its impacts are local and immediate and affecting the overwhelming majority of these billions of people residing in the developing nations. COP30 needs to deliver a strong outcome on the global goal on adaptation, and we should all agree on a minimum package of indicators from the UAE Belem work program, including the provisions of means of implementation, while demonstrating flexibility and reserving some of the remaining indicators for further technical discussions as deemed necessary. We need to send an inspiring message to the world with the Baku adaptation roadmap that we are on our way to achieving the safety and well-being of billions, leaving no one behind. There is a need to provide a platform for continuous cooperation, support, and exchange of experiences and knowledge. Above all, we need to strengthen and intensify the commensurate flow of public finances towards meeting the adaptation needs. As we mark the 10th year since the adaptation of the Paris Agreement, we recognize the unfulfilled tasks in climate finance. Our needs and expectations regarding the key enablers for climate action, such as the provision of means of implementation, including climate finance, remain the key barrier to attaining the higher ambitions of keeping the Paris goals within reach. There is an urgent need for clear, transparent and universally agreed definition of climate finance under the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement to ensure not only predictability, accessibility, transparency and trust in financial flows, but to also ensure scale, scope and speed of finance. As the Presidency has indicated, we have a number of mandates to fulfill at COP30. India and other basic partners are committed to working with you, Excellency, in the successful conclusion of these agenda items. The successful conclusion of the GST at COP28 was a welcome affirmation that we are now seriously implementing the Paris Agreement. But we must remain faithful to its architecture, hence revising and updating their indices as informed by the first global stocktake is left to parties in accordance with the Paris Agreement. Any exchange of how parties are enhancing the indices should remain a dialogue and exchange of experiences and best practices. At this juncture, when we need to speak in one voice to strengthen multilateralism, we must ensure that we do not even inadvertently undermine the architecture of the Paris Agreement. Excellencies, the basic countries are proud of their contribution to global climate action, the transition to clean and renewable energy, and the pursuit of low-carbon development. However, we cannot ignore the responsibility of developed countries, both historically and in the present. They need to reach net zero much earlier than projected to release the remaining carbon space in favor of developing countries, invest significantly more in negative emission technologies, and fulfill their obligations under the Convention and its Paris Agreement, as regards providing the means of implementation to the Global South. Excellency, we are fully with the Presidency in ensuring a successful outcome for the United Arab Emirates Just Transition Work Programme. The JTWP is very important for developing countries. It should serve as a vehicle to strengthen the implementation of the principles of equity and justice in climate change mitigation and adaptation, encompassing a whole of economy and the whole of society approach, thereby leaving no one behind. COP30 must also deliver a strong outcome for the technology implementation program, with increasing climate impacts in addition to existing development deficits. The needs of billions of people in the Global South cannot be met without reliable, affordable and equitable access.
Thank you, India. I now invite Tanzania to speak on behalf of the African group. Tanzania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I hope we will start again. Excellencies, Mr. President, the United Republic of Tanzania has the pleasure to speak on behalf of the African Group and its 54 member states on this important occasion. We want to thank the government of Brazil and the people of Belem for their hospitality and the preparation of the COP. We would also like to extend our warm congratulations to you, Mr. President, for the assumption of the presidency of COP30. The group would also like to congratulate the COP29 presidency and the team for their leadership and commitment for advancing milestone decisions under the UNFCCC. Let us also express our gratitude to the UNFCCC Secretariat for their continued support to COP30. Mr. President, today, more than 3 decades later, we return to Brazil with renewed conviction that materialism remains the most powerful tool to address the intertwined challenges of climate change and sustainable development. As the African Group also celebrates 30 years since its establishment, we remain committed to working with you to address climate change under the multilateral fora. Mr. President, climate finance remains important for the continent. Therefore, COP30 should advance climate finance. Climate fund is not optional. It is the cornerstone of implementation of our NDCs, NAPs, and long-term strategies. We are submitting our NDCs without clarity on how they will be financed and without enhanced international cooperation and support, which should actually result in commitment to ensure the implementation of all actions we all agree. Therefore, Belem must deliver concrete guidance and decision to operationalize finance obligations under both the Convention and the Paris Agreement. COP30 must create space for solutions that ensure finance is grant-based, predictable, accessible, and highly concessional. Belem must agree on the final step to ensure that full transition to the Adaptation Fund to exclusively save the Paris Agreement, including the necessary arrangements, must be ensured. Mr. President, COP30 must deliver clear and tangible indicators backed by means of implementation in our work in the GGA. This is important to advance our collective efforts towards the GGA. While we acknowledge the work of the experts, these indicators must align fully with the provisions of the Paris Agreement and the Convention. Mr. President, on loss and damage, we welcome the launch of the Barbados Implementation Plan by the Loss and Damage Fund. This is indeed significant. The BIM will not support projects if additional resources are not provided. Therefore, we call on the fund's capitalization. The Belem must advance political support for ensuring that significant capitalization happens here to ensure that the fund indeed saves the continent and other parts of the world. Mr. President, COP30 must adopt a decision on just transition pathways within the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. For Africa, this is not abstract. Our continent hosts vast natural capital resources, from carbon sinks to critical minerals, essential for low carbon emission pathways. These resources must translate into tangible benefits. Therefore, just transition pathways cannot remain a dialogue. It must deliver concrete outcomes that transform lives, expand access to energy through initiatives like Mission 300 and the provision of clean energy solutions for millions of people on the continent. Mr. President, the African Group once again pledges support to you, Mr. President, and reaffirm our commitment to working with all parties to advance climate action and implementation. We have initiated consultations on the hosting of the African COP, and I'm pleased to inform you that the African Group has received and endorsed the request of the government of Ethiopia to host COP32. In conclusion, we remain committed to ensure that Belem must deliver decisions that reflect urgent needs of the African continent and other parts of the world to ensure that the challenges we are facing are indeed supported, and we are supported in the context of materialism. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanzania. I now invite Palau to speak on behalf of AOSIS. Palau, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Apologies in the beginning, our mic wasn't working. COP presidency, congratulations on your ascension to the presidency. Palau has the honor to make this statement on behalf of 39 members of the Alliance of Small Island States. We have submitted our full statement to the Secretariat. At the outset, allow me to align our statement with the statement delivered by Iraq on behalf of G77 and China. We extend our sincere appreciation to the government of Brazil for the warm welcome and the here at COP30 in Belem. We recognize that this COP must deliver real progress across all pillars of the Paris Agreement in a way that ensures that 1.5 degrees is alive and no one is left behind. The science is clear that we are dangerously off track to limiting global warming to 1.5. The latest rounds of NDCs fall short of delivering the ambition needed. COP30 must provide a clear follow-up on the global stocktake outcomes, renewed leadership from major emitters, and alignment with the Paris Agreement's legally binding 1.5 degrees Celsius. We assure parties that there is no finger-pointing. Instead, the NDC synthesis report provides the basis for a collective approach. Since the synthesis report summarizes where we are at the global level, this should be done in the spirit of international cooperation and fundamental principle of collectivity by which we consider how close we are to meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement. On the mitigation work program, AOSIS calls for substantive outcomes that incorporates the mitigation elements of GSD outcome, particularly the energy package, highlight concrete solutions from global dialogues and investment-focused events, while remain firm and anchored in 1.5. And it also established a process to review progress by 2026. President SID's climate action is made possible by the support we receive. It is imperative that COP30 delivers the climate finance and outcomes to provide assurance for developing countries, particularly islands, that this process holds legitimacy and relevancy. As we mark the first year of the NCQG implementation, accountability within the UNFCCC is paramount to building trust and confidence. We need to increase transparency in how climate finance is reported, including finance flows to SIDS. We look forward to engaging in discussion on a successor to the Adaptation Finance doubling goal of the Glasgow Climate Pact. President, the UAE Belem work program, we look forward to a successful decision on the indicators under the UAE Belem work program. It gives us the opportunity to operationalize the GGA through a credible, balanced and workable set of indicators that does not create barriers or additional reporting burdens. We must affirm the voluntary and non-punitive nature of reporting and embed safeguards so that indicators are never used as conditionalities for accessing finance. This COP delivers an outcome that strengthens support for NAP formulation, implementation and monitoring, but also reflects on the adaptation gaps and needs that we face. We look forward to a successful completion of the review of the Warsaw International Mechanism, and we expect an outcome of the review to provide guidance on complementarity. And we acknowledge the importance that the Presidency attaches to UAE dialogue, and the AOSIS reiterates that the key platform to take forward the outcomes of the GSD. For AOSIS, the implementation of the GSD encompasses all its outcomes and serves as a mechanism to follow up on each of them. We also reiterate our call for loss and damage to be addressed as a standalone theme in GSD cycle in order for it to receive the dedicated attention it deserves.